All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you. This is our session on unleashing the power of artificial intelligence in org management. So, big term, but what we've been doing for quite a while is working on our implementation of AI. And what we really wanted to do was develop an implementation that's really truly useful for administrators, for consultants, for whoever's managing a Salesforce implementation. There's a lot of implementations of AI out there, but we really targeted ours at administrators, at consultants, and people who are managing Salesforce orgs. So, all right, so just really quick today, we're really going to focus on AI today. But I wanted to give everyone just a 10-cent overview here of what our AI resides in, and that is our Snapshot application. Snapshot is really a suite. We call it an org management solution of tools, all in one toolbox, all from one user interface. And it's really designed to help you manage Salesforce implementations. And the idea is that we're putting a lot of tools into one toolbox to help you manage orgs, deal with complexity, rather than you having to go out and get a dozen different tools to try to solve these problems. And AI is just another notch in that belt, another tool, if you will, that we've added to our toolbox. And you're going to really see that today. But since we're focusing on that, I want to spend just a minute and give you just a quick overview of all the things that we do. So we have in our toolbox, in our Snapshot suite, we have deep level technical debt, cleanup, analysis, and removal tools. We have custom algorithms for all the different metadata in your org to analyze it and come back and tell you what's not being used so that you really have a comprehensive look at how to clean up and optimize an org. We do deep level documentation for orgs. We really tackle that from a lot of angles, data dictionaries to document your schema, but we can really document any metadata process. So imagine building great documentation for flows or workflows or sharing rules or queues, whatever it might be. We have profile and permission set management tools. Salesforce wants everyone to move to this new model where you've got a base profile that's then modified by permission sets and groups. And we've got great tools to help you get there. We document security in a matrix so you can track down security. We do that for profiles, permission sets, and groups. Then we combine those things and we can put users in the matrix to tell you user access. And then we give you power tools that will do things like intelligently merge profiles, intelligently merge permission sets, help you make assignments easier. So if you're going through an optimization phase on the security side, great tools there. Really good impact analysis tools. We can take any piece of metadata and show you, whether it's a field, a flow, an email template, whatever, and show you across the org what its dependencies are, what's referencing it, what is it referencing, where's it being used. We're going to see the AI today, so sit tight for that. I'll skip on that one. And then our tool also does really deep level visual comparisons of the differences between orgs, has really powerful release management tools that check all the boxes there, does rollbacks, does production to production deployments, all those things that you would need out of a release tool. And we also have a really good relational data migration tool, which will move data, but unlike a data loader, it'll maintain all the relationships between that data. And then we layer a lot of nice features on top of that, like data scrambling, field mapping, value changing. So at the end of the day, we are a big toolbox for admins or consultants or whoever's managing the org to really address all these problems that are pretty much inevitable as your org really starts to grow and really starts to become more complex. But today, we really want to focus on our new AI implementation. On its own, it's a really, really powerful set of tools that can help do some pretty amazing things. And we feel it's the most significant implementation of AI for admins or consultants that we've seen. And we're really excited about it. And that's why we brought our CTO, Bill, today. He's the expert, and he's going to take us on a demo and show it to us. So let me hand you the ball here, Bill. Okay, Bill, you should now be in charge and take it away with the AI demo, please.
All right, great, Tom. Let's see. Can I share my entire desktop? There we go. All right. Let's see here. All right. Well, we gave this presentation at Tahoe Dreamin' just a couple of weeks ago, and there was so much overflow and the wait list was really big. So we decided we'd give it again. And I think it bodes well that people are so excited about AI. I'm excited about it. I've been working with it for a long time, but it's gotten really useful recently. It's also really fun. AI is fun. It's interesting. It's surprising, and I know I've had a lot of fun with it. So the language models have been improving and improving, and really when GPT 3.5 came out, you could get it to do useful work. Now GPT-4 is on the way, which is 10 times smarter, which is just amazing how fast this is all happening. One issue that people don't talk about that much, though, is the token limits, and I just want to say a little bit about it. The token limits are going up. They went from maybe 4K. GPT-4 has an option for a 32K token. Anthropic Claude, which is a competitor of theirs, has a 100K token limit. But really, this is a fundamental limit. And what it means is that your request and your response, chatting with the AI, can only be so big. And a token is about, think of it as a character. A word might be a couple of tokens. That's really what it's about. And so you really have to live within your token limit, because the token limit is the number of input pins on the language model, on the neural network. And if you get to the end of your network, you can't predict the next word, you can't get a response, it can't read your entire request. So token limits are very, very fundamental. And another thing I think people have talked about widely is the ability of these language models to predict the next word, and that's kind of how they work. So if you send it 3 words, I have a, then it knows the probability of the 4th word, which would probably be dream, or maybe it's headache, and then the probabilities go down from there, just depending on what you find on the internet. But what people haven't talked about is why this really matters, and what are the ramifications of this. And so the first thing I would say is your prompts are kind of riding this probability wave. And every next word in the prompt is going to be, you're going to have a percentage distribution of how likely is that word or not likely. And so if you say, I have a alligator, then that word is going to kind of crash the probability of your prompt. And the next words after that are going to be lower quality and less useful. Now, of course, your prompt may be about alligators, and in which case you really don't have any choice. And so things that are more obscure are going to have lower probabilities. But you just need to think about this, because what you really want is that prompt to surf on a high probability wave and give you great results all to the end. So the other thing I would point out about this is that these language models are kind of inherently sequential. And I'm going to give you an example of how you can make a mistake there. So for example, if I had a prompt that said, throw me the ball and pick up the bat, but don't throw the ball too hard. You all understand that. That makes total sense. A language model is going to have a problem with that. And here's the problem. When I say, throw me the ball, it's going to throw me the ball. And when I say, pick up the bat, it's going to pick up the bat. But then when I say, don't throw the ball too hard, it's going to say, I already threw the ball is gone. Why are you bringing up the ball? So it's inherently sequential. And so you can't jump around in time in a prompt. And so this is just really good advice about writing prompts. If for example, if your prompt was throw the ball gently and pick up the bat, it will do great. So it's just something to think about. I don't really hear people talking about that issue, but it's really important. Steering is important. So the way this language model works is, it's predicting the next word and then the next word and the next word. So, one of my favorite system commands that sets the context of the entire prompt is, you are an expert on the Salesforce metadata API. And then the next word and the next word and the next word is all going to be about org management. So if you say, you are a drunken pirate who likes naughty limericks, that's going to set you off in an entirely different direction. And you think about the next word and the next word and the next word, it might be entertaining, but it's probably not going to be that helpful for org management. So steering is really important. And so the API design, at least from OpenAI, they've really gotten rid of their completion models and these other models, and they're steering everything towards a chat API. And the way this works is it's a dialectic. And so if you go back to the beginning of Western civilization, you think about Socrates, he would pose the great question of the day, and then the student and the teacher would debate the question, and they would try to figure out what's going on. So that's dialectic. And so OpenAI works the same way. There's a system prompt that establishes the context for the discussion, and then there's what the user says and what the assistant says and what the user says and what the assistant says. And this is how you can get useful work out of the intelligent assistant and ask them to do things for you, and they can respond, and then you can respond and they can respond. So it works really, really well. And it's an important kind of, paradigm or organizing principle for how all of these prompts are working. Another really important issue is called few shot learning. So as in 0 shot, 1 shot, a few shots, that's what they're talking about. And what this is the ability to have fake or artificial questions and answers in your prompt. And what this will do is it will enable a pre-trained model to generalize over new categories of data with meta learning. So you've heard of metadata, now we have meta learning. And what that does is it says, here's the conversation, here's an example question, here's how I really want you to answer that question. Now here's the real question. And this works really, really well for kind of giving the language model a clue as to how you want it to behave and how you want this to work. And you'll see that here in the demo as well. So I find there's really 2 methods that work great for using AI, at least for org management. So one thing is, if you ask it questions about something it knows a lot about. So, the language model knows a lot about Apex classes. You don't really need to train it very much at all. You can just ask it questions about Apex classes. It will know a lot. As a matter of fact, the training can be counterproductive. And the other thing, though, is really where you use few shot learning and grounding data and other techniques to give the model a puzzle and all of the pieces, and then have it solve the puzzle. It's really good at this, but it needs clear instructions on how to solve it, and it needs the pieces of the puzzle to solve it. And if you do those 2 things, you will get incredible results with AI. And so that's you'll see that in the demo as well. So the token limit thing, there are some ways to overcome it, but you just need to realize, if you take a metadata snapshot of your entire Salesforce org, it could be in the hundreds of megabytes. We've seen them in the gigabytes, absolutely gigantic amounts of data. And so the token limit is a tiny, tiny fraction of that. And so this is a fundamental issue that anybody working with AI is going to have to deal with. And we have a couple of interesting solutions for it. One is the use of grounding data. The other is few shot learning. We've already talked about those. OpenAI has some ability to create functions where the language model can ask you for data that it needs, and also plugins, which is kind of the same thing. Both of those things also consume your token limit, so there's nothing magical about them. They use up your token limit. So really, I think great use of grounding data and few shot learning is the most effective thing we found for overcoming your token limits. And as I said, you simply can't put your whole Salesforce org into the language model and start asking it questions. It's way, way too big for that. So I'm going to show you 5 places in our product that we've used artificial intelligence. And so really the goal here is just, there are sharp corners in our product where, all of a sudden an admin would have to run down the hall and find a developer or ask a question or go to support or do something like that. And so what we've tried to do is really to shave all those hard corners off and make it much more powerful for just to ask for things you need and have them delivered for you without the need for another human. And again, using that intelligent assistant for that. So one thing is writing SOQL filters. It's hard. Even if you're a developer, it's hard. And now you can just describe filters you need and they're automatically delivered to you. And so what started out as one of the most difficult aspects of building data sets, for example, is now one of the easiest aspects of building data sets. Another example is explaining Apex. We talked about that a little bit earlier. OpenAI is very good at this. And so any place you're dealing with Apex, for example, in code quality or code coverage reports and so on and so forth, you see Apex, you can immediately get an explanation and functional spec, code quality, security analysis, any type of explanation you need about that Apex. Explaining deployment errors. If you've ever done data and especially metadata deployments, sometimes you will get very hard to understand errors. And so what we did was we took those errors and we took the asset that is caused the error as grounding data, sent that to OpenAI and said, please explain this to us. And it's incredibly good at this. And in fact, will in many circumstances not only tell you what's wrong, it will tell you how to fix it, which is just amazing. So the two newest parts of our AI implementation are the most significant. And the first one is called intelligent search. So this is the administrative thinking partner, research partner that you can ask any type of question about your org to. And through the clever use of grounding data, it can answer almost any question. And it's can help you with best practices, help you make decisions, help you find and set up and in our product where you need to go make changes. So it's really, really cool. And we'll show you that here in just a minute. So intelligent search is free form, right? You just ask questions and it comes up with the grounding data. Metadata Studio is a prompt engineering product that lets prompt engineers build these prompts for their org and then share them with all of the people in the org. So if you have one prompt engineer or you just want to use our sample prompts, then this becomes incredibly useful. And so for the end user, you can just select a prompt and click a button. You might have to select an asset or something. That's all you have to do. And then for the prompt engineer, you can encode all of your best practices and important information into Metadata Studio and then enforce those standards across your org as other people are using these prompts. So very, very practical way to use AI. And what's cool about Metadata Studio, and you'll see, is it integrates with Salesforce both coming and going. So you can select assets out of your Salesforce org that seamlessly become part of your prompts. And then the artificial assistant can build new assets that are important for you, which you can validate against your org and save into your org. So coming and going, this thing is integrated with Salesforce and almost a fusion of the two. And so I'll show that as well here in just a minute. All right, so I'm going to switch over to Snapshot. And can everybody see that? I hope so. And so first thing I'm going to show you is, this is a workspace. These things in blue are connected to Salesforce orgs. These things in teal are connected to developer projects like Salesforce DX that are on your local computer. And if you take a snapshot of an org and right click it, you'll see all of the documentation tools, optimization tools, and security tools in Snapshot. This is what Tom was talking about. And we're not going to get into all that today, but that just as an overview, that's kind of what you're looking at. And so one of the things you can do, though, is you can also connect all of this stuff with these arrows. And when you connect an arrow, you can also right click the arrow. And so, for example, this will move data from this org to this org. You go down here to data sets and you can build and migrate data sets. So I want to show you build data sets, though. So you're building a data set, and one of the things you have to do is select all of the objects and records that you want to move from the source, that you want to include in the data set and later migrate somewhere. And so you can select these assets over at left, and you could select all records. You could select records by name. You could select records with a fancy filter, or you can use SOQL. And so before you had to type your SOQL string in that window there and then test it and try to figure out how to make SOQL work for you. Now you can click this button and you can have AI build a SOQL filter for you. So for example, I could say, find records that are warm. Whoops.
You were clicked on the wrong side. There you go.
Yeah, find records that are warm. And it will know immediately that for this object, it's going to be the rating field and the pick list value is warm. And so then you could say, and in the computer industry, but only small companies. And you can look for that. And this immediately knows the industry is technology and the employees are less than 100. And you just click OK, and there's your SOQL filter. So, and then you can, test that. And if you look through the records here, you'll see that they all match that filter. So great example where something that used to be a sticking point, used to be the hardest thing to do, is now the easiest thing to do. All you do is click that button, describe what you want, and it'll write it for you. And obviously we're using a clever use of grounding data here to provide all that information and to make it easy to write that prompt. And now if you go forward, of course, you can go and actually build your data set, and then at some future date, you can migrate that. So that's just building SOQL filters. Here's another example. In the optimization capabilities, we have a really nice code quality report. And this is cool. You can select any of your Apex classes. It'll give you about 70 different quality parameters. It'll show you where the problems are. It's really useful. If you go to display report, you can see all of your Apex classes together and really nice dashboards and all of that stuff. But now when you're looking at an Apex class, you may have questions about what this does or what that does. And so you can right click and explain the Apex class. And now the first one is the functional spec. You can just send that to AI. And if they're not too busy over there, gives you a complete functional spec of that Apex class. And we also have best practices and code quality. So really useful to just get, what does this class do and how does it do it? And you don't have to be a developer to find that out anymore. And so this says, examine all available literature on the best practices used by Apex developers and then analyze this class for those best practices. So that's just, that's extraordinary. You're leveraging the combined information about Apex on the entire internet for your class right here and getting those results. So it's cool. It's still it's still impressive to me. Third way, if you're doing a deployment from this org to this org, you put your arrow in there, right? And then you can right click the arrow and bring up deploy metadata. And so what I've done is these two orgs are wildly different. And I've kind of thrown the kitchen sink at the job list here. I've selected a whole bunch of create assets over here. And I'm going to do a deployment. So I'm going to get lots of errors. And when I do the deployment, the metadata API will tell me what's wrong in its way. And then I'll get the deployment errors. And before you had to just hash through them and try to figure it out and make changes in your job list and, figure out what was going on. Now what you can do is right click and say, explain error messages. And so find a good one here. So you can find an error message that you're interested in and say, explain it. And so once again, we're using grounding data from the actual asset and the error message, sending that to OpenAI, and it knows pretty much everything that you've done wrong. And it'll not only show you what the error message is, it'll give you some different steps to fix the problem. In this case, it's giving us a few options to how we could resolve this error. So really helpful. Once again, something that we would get a lot of calls in support for, and a lot of times we wouldn't understand the error messages either. This is super useful and helps you understand deployment problems and resolve those really quickly. All right, fourth way. I'm going to show you intelligent search. This is an administrative thinking partner that is kind of like an Oracle. You can just ask it stuff and it'll tell you what all kinds of stuff about your org, and it's kind of totally freeform. You can just ask questions and follow up, you know. So I'll show you, for example, what are the fields in one of my custom objects here? And it'll show me the fields. And now I'm going to say, what are the validation rules in that object? And it'll bring out the validation rules. And then I can say, well, this validation rule looks pretty interesting right here. Let's copy that and say, what does that do? And it'll give me a description of what that validation rule is. And I can even say, how do I change that rule? And it'll immediately take me into the setup menu. And what's cool is it knows the rule, it knows the object, it knows what steps need to be made to change it. It's pretty interesting. And now we can go deeper. For example, let's say, what are the GDPR problems in that object? And just like that, it'll analyze the object. It'll focus in on the social security field where it thinks there are problems, perhaps, or at least it's sensitive. It'll look at the security classifications. It'll look at the compliance groups and provide all of that information to you. And, you know, what's amazing is it's as if I'm working with another person, but I'm not. And it's just through, you know, clever use of bringing in seamless grounding data based on your queries that we're able to answer all of these questions about your org. So let me go a little farther here. If you're changing the context, you should clear your work so that it's not getting, you know, apples and oranges. And I could say, show me my role hierarchy. And let me see if I've got a filter here. I've got a filter and roles are not in my filter. Let me fix that real fast. This is just a way to have it focus on things that you're interested in. So let me try that again. There's my role hierarchy. And now say, find any problems or inconsistencies in my role hierarchy. And it'll find a whole bunch of issues. This is a developer org. The hierarchy's got the wrong people reporting to the wrong people in some circumstances. It comes up with all of that. And you know, we'll tell you, you know, job classifications with the wrong, reporting to the wrong thing, missing descriptions, all of that type of stuff. Let's do one more here. Let's say, show me my Apex classes. I should have had a joke ready. So I think with the growing pains with OpenAI, that sometimes this can happen, that it just takes them a long time to respond. And I know they're busy over there, but I think it's been getting better. Well, this may take a minute to respond. What you can do is you can actually go through your Apex classes, see who wrote them, see when they were written, you can then pull out any Apex class and start asking questions about it. It's like refactor this class or do, whatever you want to. And it's really impressive what you can do, especially with Apex. And so here it is. And then I could say, here's all my different classes, who wrote them, when they were written. I could say, what is my oldest Apex class? And it gives me the answer to that. It's right here. And it says, please evaluate that Apex class for best practices and it gives me a complete best practices report. So really, really amazing what you can do with your intelligent thinking partner that helps you solve administrative problems. You can also, I won't go into all of this, but so far I've been focused on metadata. You can also focus on objects, which gives you object schema, and you can solve all types of problems related to records and objects. And then also org management, which will give you all kinds of information about best practices and white papers and other things that are, kind of at a higher level of org management instead of specifically about different assets. All right, that's intelligent search. Now going to the last, number 5 here, the last place we're using AI so far is Metadata Studio. And this is our prompt engineering product. Now, if you're an end user, this is really easy to use. You can use our example prompts, or maybe you have a prompt engineer that's built prompts or customized our prompts specifically for your org. And it's just really easy to use. You just select a prompt you want. You can read the description if you want, and you can click the submit prompt button. In this case, the prompt will let me select a flow, and it will go through all of the nodes in the flow and the flow itself and give them all an AI generated description if they don't have one. And their descriptions are really good. They're very nuts and bolts functional descriptions for the flow. So all I have to do is select that prompt over here in the flow category and submit it. It asks me to select one of the prompts in my org. And then come on, OpenAI. There you go. And now you can see that I've had descriptions added to the prompt, and I've had, in various places where descriptions can go into the flow, each node has been described and the entire flow has been documented. And now I can hit the validate, and I can turn around and validate that asset against my current org. And we just do that. We do a test deployment of the new flow that's been created. And then we let the metadata API tell us if it's valid. It is valid. And now we can either export that as a file for Salesforce DX, or we can deploy the asset and actually put those new descriptions for the flow back in our org. And of course, you can import and export and make other changes, whatever you need to do right there. So that's a really cool prompt. I want to show you another one here. This is another flow example. We're going to take a flow and we're going to create an Apex trigger and class from the flow. Now that only makes sense for a record triggered flow, but a record triggered flow essentially, that's what it does essentially. So now we can, once again, when we submit the prompt, it'll prompt us. In this case, it's only going to ask for a record triggered flow. So the other flows are not available for us because that doesn't make sense for our prompt. And just like that, we've been delivered a trigger right here that we can validate and an Apex class right here, along with documentation that tells us exactly what that class does. And so then you can export that at that point and go validate that or make changes there. So these prompts are super useful. they're connected to Salesforce data on the front end. And then once the artificial assistant generates you new metadata assets, you can then test them against your org and then export them as a file or actually deploy them if that's what you want to do. Let me give you one more example here. So this is an interesting prompt down here. It'll just let you create a custom object. You just describe a custom object you want and boom, it'll create it. And in order to do that and make it really work every time seamlessly, we put few shot learning in here. So there's an example question, and then there's an example answer. And the example answer has that object, just in the right format for my org. And what will happen is then when you ask a real question, OpenAI will follow your example. The language model will follow your example and it'll really give you great results. So that's the type of thing your prompt engineer would want to set up. But let's go to Prompt Studio real quick. And what I'm going to show you is that I'm going to delete the few shot learning here. So I'm going to delete the example question and the example answer. And now I'm just going to say to the language model, just try to create me a custom object cold. And so I can enter my description of the custom object, how I want it to be. And we didn't give it much to go on, but there are a lot of information out there about custom objects, and it comes back with an answer. Let's validate it. And so now when we validate this custom object, we find out that there's a couple of errors. And so now what we're going to do, though, is we're going to create a message. And so the message says, the metadata asset you created could not be deployed in the org. Here's the error messages, go fix it. And so now we can submit that prompt, and the intelligent assistant will look at the XML it created, it'll look at the error messages, and it'll come back and give us an object that can be deployed in the org. So what you're seeing is I'm actually conducting a conversation with this intelligent assistant that's supercharged with Salesforce data, both on the source where the prompt can direct you to include Salesforce data, and then also on the destination where there's error messages or you're deploying assets to make sure that they're valid. So really a cool synthesis of what you can do with OpenAI and what you can do with Salesforce. All right, that's my presentation. I think we've got time for some questions.
Thanks, Bill. Bill, why don't you hand me the host rights? Just stop your share there. And then if you go click on the little ... next to my name in the panelist there and say make host.
Let's see. How do I do it, Tom? Oh,
there should put your mouse over my name. There should be a ... Click that and should let you make me the host. Or you right click on me maybe. Did that work?
Not yet. Go ahead and take a question. I'll try to find it.
All right. Okay, so we got a bunch of questions here. First couple are around security, Bill. So why don't we tackle those out of the gate? One is, what does grounding data mean? Where is it stored? How is it used by OpenAI? And then let me give you the second question before you answer so you can tackle both of them. If you use AI integration in your org, is your org data then added to the body of data that contributes to AI's learning? Or are there guardrails in place that ensure that this does not happen? So this is really important and why we believe this is very safe. So Bill, why don't you address those?
Absolutely. So first things first, you can turn all of this off. It's a preference. You can turn it all off and not use AI in the context of our Snapshot product. People have been using it successfully for many years without AI. So, that's not a big problem. So grounding data would not have data from your org, record data from your org, but it could have metadata. And we definitely would be using metadata. And OpenAI, in their terms of use, has made it clear that they're not training their language model on any API transactions. So if you think about what's going on, you've got your token limit and the request and the response is in that token limit. We send that off to them. they send back a response, but then that data that we sent to them is not stored anywhere. It's a stateless transaction. They're not training their model on it. If they did train their model on it, I think it would be a disaster. They would get caught doing that very quickly. That would be not, I believe them that they're not doing it. All that having been said, I'm still thinking about security. It's kind of job one for us. I mean, our entire application is a zero trust security model application. And, we're looking at the situation carefully. We might need to sanitize grounding data. I don't see a reason to do that yet, but we might. And we might need to let people put their own, right now we're just paying everyone's bill for OpenAI. People might want to have their own accounts, and we could also do that. So if you have strong opinions about that, send me an email, let me know, especially if you're a customer. I'm listening carefully. We're trying to figure out how to make it extremely secure. I believe at present it is.
Cool. Thank you so much, Bill. All right, we got more questions here. I'm going to just move on to our next slide here, just so we've all can see the ways that you can contact us if you don't know how to get in touch with us already, and also let everybody know that we are at Midwest Dreamin' here in a few weeks. We'd love to see you if you're around. It's a popular show. So here's one, Bill. Can you use AI to generate code comments and save them to the Apex source?
Yeah, it works great. It works great, but that's not in our default prompt. We'll do it today. That's a great one. I've seen it work. It'll comment each method and put it in a really well organized, comment block and go right down the Apex and document the heck out of it.
Yeah, so you could build your own prompt right now with our tool that would do it. Or since you gave us the great idea, we're going to add that prompt into the default ones. These prompts will be updating. We'll be adding more and more as we go. We've got a bunch of ones out of the gate, but
Tom, for example, if you wanted to document your Apex in a very specific way, you could use few shot learning for that. So let's say you want to have one comment line with a / in front of every method or something like that. You do that on few shot learning and say, here's an example question. Here's our answer. It'll follow that pattern. And so you can really make it document, anything, any way you want.
Yeah, that's really key point, Bill, because you can do that with really any of the prompts if you want. You can take a prompt, train it on your specific organization, business process or whatever it is, and then it will understand that. And when it creates things, it will follow those guidelines. So really, really cool. So here's one. Can you use AI for checking data security? For example, can I use AI to see why a particular user has access or doesn't have access to certain records? So before you answer that, I'll say that you can do that right now with Snapshot. We have reports that will give you that information. But could that be done with AI?
I'm sure it could be done with AI. I don't think we have any relevant grounding data that would, cover that scenario.
Okay. But we do have other tools in Snapshot that will help you figure out that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we still got questions rolling here. Can you have the flow prompt also put descriptions on variables or other elements?
So the way flows work is that every node, what they call a node, can have a description field. So there's a gazillion places to put descriptions in flows. I do not believe variables are one of them, but they might be. I can't remember. So the answer is flows will allow you to put descriptions wherever flows will allow you to put a description. If you put a description, for example, you can't put a description on the start node. If you put a description on the start node, it'll reject it. You won't be able to deploy that flow.
Yep. Okay, cool. It says, can all the AI enhancements included in the tool do something like moving all existing triggers in the org to a trigger framework as part of refactoring?
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, that's a good one. Let's go do that. That's a great one. So, all right. Yeah, select all your triggers and then give me a trigger framework according to best practices. And yeah.
Okay,
Love it.
cool. Well, we'll build prompts for that. Awesome. Good one, Vinay. All right. How accurate is the information provided by GPT in light of the information cutoff of the GPT database? With the technology and best practices changing all the time, how does that factor into the quality of the responses? I think,
Yeah.
Bill,
So
that's one of the things you addressed in your presentation about how we work with that issue. But why don't you
yeah,
expand
well,
on it?
I think specifically what they're talking about is that GPT wasn't trained, it was trained up to 2021 and was not trained after that. And that's okay because thinking hasn't changed in the last 2 years. Thinking is still pretty much the same. And what we need to do is provide really accurate grounding data and few shot learning examples for these prompts and let it do the thinking. So it's back to what I said earlier. If you provide it a puzzle and all of the pieces, it can solve the problem. And so that's really what that's all about. But that's a great question.
So the next question is, if org metadata is being accessed by AI, which means it's then outside the org, it belongs to what guardrails are in place to ensure that data cannot be accessed and used at any point in the future by entities with malicious intent. So I think we've addressed that. Yeah, is that, also, how do we know that the data cannot be scraped and used? So I think the answer is, it's a transaction that's sent through their API in an encrypted way, and then it's stateless. They do not retain it and use it for training any of the data. So that's that. Can you do the opposite of what you showed, moving flows to triggers and move triggers to flows? Yeah, the answer is
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, keep the prompt ideas coming, gang. These are really good.
Write these down. Well, we've got the recording.
Yeah.
All right, we got another one. Is OpenAI integrated in the pipeline management, like resolving conflicts, helping in back promotions? So it is integrated from an error message perspective. So if you receive an error message, you can then, I think Bill showed this, search it and get a human readable description of what it means and how to resolve it. So that's one way that we've integrated it there. If you have ideas on other ways that we could use it, we'd be interested in hearing it for sure. But as far as deployments are, with our pipeline right now go, we're using it for error message handling, which truly was the biggest barrier that people ran into when doing deployments. So it should be really, really useful to have it there. Okay, awesome. I think that's all our questions. Really appreciate everybody's time. Hopefully everybody was as excited as to see it as we were to show it to you. We're really excited about the new AI stuff. As Bill said, new prompts coming, more capabilities coming. So keep the feedback coming our way. If you're not a current customer, you want to see a demo of our tool and all the things that it can do just beyond AI, just hit that sales email that you see there, sales@Metazoa. We'd love to give you a demo, or you can go to metazoa.com. There's a link to sign up for a demo there. Just a reminder, if you're at Midwest Streaming, I'll be at the booth. So come by and say you saw me on the webinar and I looked weird on camera. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate your time today. Bill, thank you very much. And we'll talk soon.